to be part of this pre-proposal conference for the pair of requests for proposals that were released as part of our Percent for the Arts program. My name is Kevin Kelly. I'm the manager of city planning for the city of Rochester. And we have a couple more folks with us here today from the city team. And if you want to introduce yourselves, we'll start with Heather.
Hi, Heather Anderson, Senior City Planner, also with the Office of City Planning.
And Johanna.
And I'm Johanna Brennan from the City Law Department. Hi.
Thanks. So Heather and Johanna and a group of several other city staff have been working with us closely, along with some very variety of artists and arts organization representatives as kind of a stakeholder group that we've been working with for over a year now to develop this program and develop some other initiatives. So this group wants to, we want to present today on this program and give you an overview of what these RFPs are all about and make sure everyone's clear about what our intentions are here and what the possibilities are. And then spend the majority of our time after that taking questions from any of you that might want some clarification on the requirements as part of the RFP and what just sort of our overall objectives for the program. So with that, we've got a slide deck to go through, and I'll start us off, turn it over to Heather, and then we'll take some questions after that. So Heather, if you want to go to the next slide. Thanks. So just to give you a little bit of background on kind of what brought us here today. Some of you may be aware that the city's actually had an arts policy on the books for quite a while now, since 2007, as a means to set aside funding for public art. Unfortunately, it hasn't really been utilized very much in the last several years, but the city's intention at this point, beginning last year, is to focus more resources on enhancing the art scene in Rochester, in particular public art. So a lot of that began with the adoption of our comprehensive plan, which is called Rochester 2034. It was adopted in 2019. And there's an entire section of that plan that's about arts and culture, and it laid out a number of goals and strategies related to that, about the arts and culture ecosystem in general. But it also had some specifics about sort of jumpstarting this Percent for Arts program and other ways that we as a city can be investing in the arts. And so last year we formed kind of an artist stakeholder group, and that's called the Arts and Creative Community Committee, which is a mouthful, so we shorthand that to AC3. And the co-chairs of that group, and these are all artists and folks representing arts organizations outside of the City Hall. The co-chairs of that group are Annette Ramos, Sean Dunwoody, and Thomas Warfield. And we have a couple of members of that group here today as well, part of the AC3. And alongside of the formation of that group, we've formed kind of an internal committee, which we call the City Arts Team, or CAT. And those two groups have been working collaboratively for over a year now on a number of different initiatives. And if you go to the next slide, I can get into what some of those initiatives are. So despite the fact that we haven't done a whole lot as a city, honestly, with the Percent for Arts program since it was formed, there's been a lot of other ways the city has been investing in arts and culture. And by our account, digging back through the last 6 years or so, over $2 million in funding for arts and culture. So we want to do more. That's a good start, but I think we need to do more, and this is one way that we're looking at. Another initiative that we are working on parallel to this Percent for Arts program that we're working on with the AC3, with the City Arts team, and some other local stakeholders is starting just very early stages, starting some conversations about how might we replace the Arts Council that we used to have here in Rochester, because that's left a big void. We no longer have that not-for-profit sort of alliance advocacy organization, at least in that form. There are some other artist groups that have formed since then that are doing great work. like Rock Arts United and the Arts in the Loop group and folks like that, that are starting to fill that space a little bit. But we think there's an opportunity to form that nonprofit once again. And so we're working with some stakeholders on that. And then in addition, we are we're looking at developing an arts and cultural plan for the Rochester area. And this would just be more of a big picture look at, some of the assets that we have in Rochester, and then who we are and where do we want to be as a community as it relates to arts and culture. And through that plan, we'll develop some goals and strategies. So that hasn't started yet. That's just one of our objectives to do in the near future. And then, yeah, so those are the main things that we're working on. And with that, I'll turn it over to Heather to talk more specifically about this public art program that we're working on.
Thank you, Kevin. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you. So first I'm going to talk about the public art programs generally for background, and then we will walk through the RFPs. So as Kevin mentioned, last year, the Percent for the Arts program, it was refocused on equity. This was in response to community feedback that public art funding was not providing opportunities for emerging artists, artists of color, and small arts organizations from the city. We also heard calls for art in neighborhoods that historically have not seen as much public art funding as, say, downtown or neighborhood of the arts. So accordingly, the vision for Percent for the Arts is to support underrepresented artists and arts organizations and increase access to art in neighborhoods throughout the city. The basic goal of the Public Murals program and the Public Art Installations program is to create a series of artworks on city-owned property. So with this slide, we want to highlight the general differences between the programs. Both the programs, both the Public Murals program and the Public Art Installations program, are using $100,000 of Percent for the Arts funding. The Murals program will, of course, be murals only, and the Public Art Installations program will include physical art, excluding murals. So physical art can include things like sculpture, functional art such as bike racks or bus benches, and interactive art. Both programs require art to last at least 5 years. However, in the Public Art Installations program, we may require a longer duration based on certain factors, including project cost. For example, we are likely to require a longer duration for a project costing $50,000 than a project costing $5,000. City-owned properties include many types of properties, such as those listed here. However, we worked with multiple departments to identify city-owned properties that are good candidates for public art, and then use that list of candidate properties to create a map. And right now I'm going to stop sharing so that Kevin can share his screen so we can share that map with you all. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. It is posted on the RFP web pages, but we wanted to make sure you'd had a chance to look at it and just kind of walk you through it a little bit. So you can see that on the legend there, the different types are indicated on the map. And it's important to note as you're looking through this that there are some eligible properties that are not mapped, including traffic control boxes and city-owned vacant lots. And the reason we didn't include those is because they're so numerous that it would take up the whole map. But it's just important for you to be aware that those are also eligible. So keep that in mind as you're looking through these different sites.
And folks, as you'll see, if you have a chance to look at this map, this is an interactive map, so you can actually click on the icons to get the name of the site. And as I'm sure you've figured out, this map is not meant to show that all of these locations will soon have public art on them. We don't have nearly enough funding to do that, but this is meant to show organizations that are interested in responding to this, that these are the types of city-owned properties that are candidates for this program, and these sites are, possibilities for where public art could be located.
Kevin, can you post the link in the chat? I saw someone asked for the link to that in the chat.
Sure can.
Thank you. Okay, so now I will go back to okay, so now I'm going to walk through an overview of the RFPs with a few things that we want to call attention to. Please note this presentation is not meant to replace a close reading of the RFPs. It is intended to provide a foundation for a good discussion with you afterward. So what does administration of these programs entail? Generally, it entails these 4 tasks in consultation with the city. The work will require coordination with the city and artists. And of the total program $100,000, up to $20,000 can be paid to the consultant as administrative fees, with the remaining money going to artists for their time and project costs. The RFPs list these items as the required proposal content. Now, discussing these programs can get confusing fast because we are in some ways talking about an RFP to administer another RFP. So we want to remind folks that your responses to these RFPs should not be art proposals. The art proposals come in the subsequent call for artists. And you also do not have to propose specific locations. The map is intended to give you all ideas for how you would administer the program. You could use the information to propose a unifying element for the program, whether location or geographically based or theme-based, or you could propose a more open-ended approach. We're open to either, but we expect the responses to communicate what your approach would be and your thinking behind it. If you do propose specific locations, think about the site. So some sites may be better suited to certain types of art than others. Some sites may have community or historical significance that you could develop a theme around. And some sites may lend themselves to a participatory installation, for example, having youth involved installing artwork at a school or art center. So if you're proposing specific locations, just show how you are considering the characteristics of those sites. The RFP asks for a list of subcontractors. Now, the artists that will be selected in the later call for artists will essentially be your subcontractors. However, we recognize that those artists are unknown at this point. So the only subcontractors that you will be listing in your response are those that you intend to use to assist with administering the program, if any. I think for most of you, there will probably be none. We also want to make sure you know that if you are not MWBE certified, it does not preclude you from being a consultant for these programs. So you do not have to be MWBE certified to be a consultant, to administer these programs. And once again, since artist subcontractors are not known, you are responding with information about your organization. Here's a refresher on the evaluation criteria. The main thing we want to clarify here is that since artist subcontractors are not known yet, you are primarily responding with information about your organization when you're talking about MWBE and workforce goals. However, it would be helpful to hear what strategies you will use to engage artists of color and women artists. Since the vision for these programs is to support underrepresented artists, we need to know that it is a priority for you. So proposal submission. One or more organization may respond to one or both of these RFPs. In other words, you can be one organization responding to one or both, or you could be an organization partnering with another organization or multiple organizations to respond to one or both. Your response should be a PDF emailed to me by 5 p.m. on Monday, September 12th. And please know that your submission is permission to contact references, so prepare your references accordingly. We wanted to end on the timeline for the RFP. We will be posting the recording of this meeting as well as the Q&A from it online. The deadline for all questions is August 24th, and we will post the responses to those questions by August 26th. Additionally, we will email the responses to everyone who has emailed us with a question. After the selection and award notification, the city will work with the awardees on a professional services agreement, which will then need approval by City Council. The RFPs include a PSA template. There's a link to the PSA template on the RFP's web pages to give you an idea of what that will look like. Of course, it will be tailored to this project after the awards are decided. And the projected agreement start date is December. Beyond that, we're really hoping to get the call for artists out as early as possible in 2023 so that we have the full construction season, April to October of 2023, for the art installation. Okay, that concludes the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing. I think we have enough people on this call that it would be helpful if you have a question, if you use the raise your hand function. And alternately, if you're feeling shy or would not like to speak, you can also enter your question in the chat box. So I'm trying to look in the chat box to see if there's any questions there.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that this is an opportunity for you all in case you have any points of confusion or anything that's not clear about this process. And once again, whatever is asked here, we'll do our best to answer, and then there can be submitted questions and everything will just get posted to the website. So if, for example, an organization not able to make it today, they can come back to that website and review the questions, and that might help with the development of their proposal.
So we do have a couple questions in the chat box. The first is from Hannah. Is there an event/PR budget?
So that would be something that an organization, if they're responding to this, if they wanted to propose that as part of their approach, that they, in the process of a call for artists, in the process of promoting the art that the public art that eventually gets created, if they wanted to propose to do some sort of an event around that, I think that's something that we would entertain. In terms of PR around it, that would also be part of their proposed approach. Is they would say in their proposal that this is how we are going to get the word out about our call for art, and this is how we propose to work with the city, because the city will be a partner with you throughout this process, whatever organization is selected. So public relations would be a part of that effort, and that certainly could be talked about in your proposal.
We've also been communicating with the mayor's communication team to publicize these programs through them. So I think that could be part of the discussion as well. Okay, the next question is, did you cover the consultant selection process? From Blue, thank you, we did not. So there will be a review panel of 7 people reviewing these proposals. And then the timeline was in that table that I posted. So we asked for stakeholder involvement. Right now, the panel is 6 city staffers and 1 stakeholder. And we intend to, sorry, when was the notification process, or the notification is the week of October 10th. Did you have any other specific questions, Blue, about it?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Sorry, my audio's been weird. I had to dip in and out there. Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, there's been a bunch of discussions thus far how this process would go. So I was wondering if that was all settled. And I'm assuming those 7, did you say 6 city staff and 1 other person?
Yeah.
Assuming that panel will be those names will be public, right?
I think Johanna, of the 3 of us, Johanna has the most experience with RFP reviews, so I think she can speak to that.
Yeah, the names of the panel members can be made public. Our process will not be a public meeting. Our review process, in fact, a lot of it will be done by individuals and then we'll get together. How we actually, the final evaluation forms are a public document, but how each of us on the panel votes on those or fills them out, the names of each individual evaluation is not public information, but generally it's a very open process, and this is what we do all the time. The city issues dozens and dozens and dozens of RFPs every year, and does something similar to this. It's primarily generally city staff, but we not infrequently we will have someone with special expertise from the public join on that panel as well. So we've done this before in this way.
Yeah. No, assuming, and so like, just for the discussion for everybody else to hear, because I think I've got some insider track on some of this. The AC, how that relates to the AC3 group advising on this is what is the interplay there? Is there any?
Yeah, so we basically open, so the AC3, again, for those that are not familiar, is the Arts and Creative Community Committee, which is a group of stakeholders that we started working with last year. And I see Kelly had a question later in the chat about what is a stakeholder. And obviously broadly, there's many stakeholders related to this issue, but specifically when we're referring to it right now, in this case, we're talking about the members of the AC3 group, which is kind of like a steering committee for this initiative. So anyways, they've been working with us on this initiative all along. And at a certain point when we decided to, okay, we're going to start to develop the RFPs now. And we basically asked any of the members of the AC3 if they would like to participate on the review panel for submissions. And so we invited them to be part of that. And we had one of the AC3 members volunteer to do that. That being said, it's not too late if an additional member of the AC3 wanted to be part of this. We certainly could do that. But that's kind of how we got to the numbers we're at today.
So that's one of the stakeholders. Is that what you mean, Kevin? One of the
Correct.
stakeholders is
Right.
a member of the AC3.
Yeah.
Yes, and those are the non-City Hall folks that we are opening up this process to be a part of, because they've been helping us develop it since the beginning.
Right. And then are those other 6 people, are those the CAT? Are those
They're all members of the CAT, the City Arts team. So those are folks in various departments, including Heather, Johanna, myself, and others that have some kind of relevance to the development of public art, whether it be through environmental services or rec centers, that sort of thing.
I also just want to throw out there too, to make it clear that in working on the concept with AC3, there was a certain point where we were going to get specific enough that we asked those who were interested in applying to the RFP to step off, to recuse themselves and step off the committee, so that they weren't privy to information prior to the RFP release. So I want to make that clear.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to get to that too, because I was one of those people. Amanda was one of those people. I think just for other people to know that you all were really careful about that. And I think that's important.
Thanks, Blue.
Okay, so the next question is there a maintenance budget? Which is a great question. There isn't, as part of the $200,000 buckets for the programs or for the development of artworks, but we have determined with AC3 and with the CAT, with the City Arts team, that the percent for arts funding in the future can be used for maintaining art that has been created through the percent for the arts fund, or funding rather. So that's kind of an exciting thing, because I think that that's been something the city has been really trying to determine a long-term city arts policy around, its public art maintenance. But with this project, we were able to say, if these projects that get installed in this first round need maintenance in the future, we can use percent for the arts funding to maintain and upkeep them.
Yeah, and that would be funding from future years. So it wouldn't necessarily come out of the money that we have for this program right now, this
Yes.
current year.
Okay, does the
I'm just going to add one little thing to that, and that's that, you know, with both of the projects, the murals and the other more general one, you know, we will be looking for how the projects will be as maintenance free as possible, because you know, we do have some concern about that, both with murals and with sculptures, that first of all, they I think Heather mentioned that there's the expectation that these projects last at least 5 years, and that, you know, means basically maintenance free for 5 years as much as possible. So that's what we will be looking for from the artists in their contracts, to provide information about how long the artwork will last and what they've done to make it as maintenance free as possible. And if maintenance is required, to let us know what would be required.
Yeah, and also I'll mention too that we've had many long discussions, very productive discussions with members of the AC3 and the city's arts team about the various kinds of public art, and recognizing that there's really wonderful public art that is temporary in nature, that is changeable in nature, and that there's a lot of great public art that's performance-based and that sort of thing. And this program is just simply not designed to fund those things right now, but that does not mean that we don't value those and see that there's a great place for those in our city. It's just, we're just kind of getting off the ground with like a pilot program essentially with this, to see if we could fund what we call capital art or physical art. And then in future years, we think there's going to be some opportunities to get more into non-capital art, like performance or education-based public art, as long as it's being able to be consumed by the public. That's what we consider to be public art. So we're just, that's the distinction there, of wanting to see that's kind of durability, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't see the value in other forms of public art that are more temporary in nature. They just aren't being funded by this particular program.
Okay, great. So the next question is, does the consultant hired need to be an incorporated business and or 501c3?
Johanna, you want to take that one? Or Heather?
I figured you were expecting me to answer that. No, no, there's no requirement one way or the other. We fully realize that many that there could be organizations that are 501c3s, or they could be for-profit, or they could not be incorporated at all. That's not an issue. The only thing that is possibly going to be an issue is with insurances, and that we need to have an entity that is able to have insurance. But other than that, no requirement.
And as a follow-up question to that, are there organizations that are not eligible, such as university affiliated orgs?
Not necessarily.
So.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we certainly, want to focus on the end result around, the artists that we're looking to get involved here, and the small arts organizations and emerging artists and that sort of thing. But in terms of who is administering these funds, we're not necessarily limiting that.
Great. Okay, and Brenda asked, are lamp poles available to Mosaic? I believe the answer is yes, because those would be under DES purview, so yes.
Yeah, and along those lines, use that to imagine what other pieces of street furniture, whether you're decorating existing street furniture or creating new street furniture, benches, bike racks, anything along those lines. Not only would those be eligible, but I think, as you can imagine, we would love to have more money than we have right now for this. But it's because it's a relatively small amount of money that I think it's more likely to work for smaller scale projects than, especially if we want to do lots of pieces of art, because the funding isn't there right now to do lots of pieces of large scale art.
Okay, and the next question is from Eric, who says, I have a question about our org, a bit long to type. So do you want to go ahead and?
I do. I also, double echoing, sorry about that. I also want to make a comment just about maintenance for you guys to consider is you can do all the planning in the world, but if someone's got a marker or a can of spray paint It does not matter. That's what we've been experiencing at the skate park. One day I'll find out who Sauce is. But we've already done 3 different buffings and we're about to try and do yet another thing. So this idea of a 5-year maintenance on a mural, location. All it takes is someone with a marker or like a really good can of spray paint. And so I just want to make sure that for you guys, that expectation is just understood. Like we can, like I've got murals that haven't been touched for a decade and these were up for a month and the same person is going back and back and back location.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's a great point. Thanks for mentioning that, Eric. And we definitely see a difference between something being defaced and something not being durable.
Cool.
So I think our focus is mostly going to be on,
longevity.
ensuring, things that are proposed and executed that are
Gotcha.
durable in nature. And the city has some resources, as you know, to work against the defacing, but that's not going to be held against the artist for
Okay,
sure.
cool. I just want to make sure that
No, it's a
That's
good,
in-
it's definitely a good consideration. And I want to say too, we're in a fiscal year where we actually have access to another bucket of % for the arts funding. So if one of the artworks is installed and it is defaced, we could potentially dip into that money now. We have access to money now that we could use to help with that.
Awesome. So that wasn't actually my question, but thank you for answering that one. So, our nonprofit has no full-time employees. So when it comes time to kind of putting those things, should we just say, like, make that statement, like, this is how we exist. This is the core staff who are volunteering year round, who are likely to be involved. But even then, we like our crew rotates depending on life. And timing, someone's available this month, they're not available the next month. So trying to nail down 6 months from now for our group is tough. So just ballpark it. And I believe I saw that there's wiggle room. So if we need to make adjustments, we can, but I just kind of want to make sure that is understood.
That's definitely, give us the full narrative. Let us know that you can't give us a definitive, but here's the projected. I think we're, in terms of things like MWBE and workforce goals, we're working with the city team on that because they're aware that, again, $80,000 of this pot is going to artist subcontractors that we don't know who they are yet. So this is kind of a unique project for us to work on these kinds of goals, and they're aware of that. So give the full narrative on the project, and we can connect you with the right city staff to talk about these things as needed.
Yeah, and I went through a version of this with the skate park where we didn't know who we were using and then we just added them in and worked along the guidelines for sure already. But just want to make sure that for this one, that would still be okay.
Yeah, Eric, I just would add, oops, sorry.
No, go ahead, Johanna.
Yeah, it will be good to have that information so that we won't bug you too much about workers' compensation insurance too. If you don't have actual employees, that enters into that, and you won't have us nagging you about that. So let us know. Yeah.
I mean, we went the CE 200 route because all the artists were then brought in as independent contractors, and usually it's a single person doing it themselves. So they were able to do the CE 200.
Eric, just to clarify, and I'm glad you brought this up, when you refer to folks that sort of unpredictable, they're sort of coming and going, are you talking about the artists that you typically work with?
No.
That would have administer this? The
core crew that is part of in this case, Wall Therapy / Synthesis Collaborative. There's a core of us that usually are there. But even with the skate park, my supplies person had to dip out literally after. They're like, here's my list, it's not finished, I have a life scenario that I can no longer be part of this. And we just have to adapt. So I just want to make sure, like, I think with a lot of the groups, we all maybe speak for everyone else, like they may be in similar scenarios where when we are these underfunded art, DIY arts organizations, you use who you can work in.
Yeah, no, we totally recognize that. It's not like this is an RFP for,
Right.
architecture firms where
Right.
which have a different kind of situation. I wanted to just double check though, because if you were talking about the artists that you
Oh,
typically
no.
work with, I want to emphasize for anyone else that's wondering about that we would not expect any respondents at this point to know exactly who the artists are that you're going to be working with.
Yep.
If you do know who they are and you have a real concrete idea that you want to propose, you're welcome to do that. At this stage, but we're not requiring that in the response.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so sorry, I'm getting lost in the chat. There's lots of good questions. So the question of, we're going to have access to this presentation after the meeting, and someone else answered it and put a link in the chat to the Arts Initiatives webpage for the city, but I also just dropped the links to the RFP web pages in the chat as well. So the recording for this meeting as well as the Q&A from this meeting will be posted on all of those pages. Someone asked, can you define stakeholder? And I believe that we answered that question already, that the AC3 is a group of artist stakeholders we've been working with. So when we say there's a stakeholder on the review panel, it's one of those folks.
And just another comment on that. I know we're talking primarily about this public art program today, but just a comment on our experience with the AC3 group in general. While that is a limited group of about 12 or so folks, as we work on all these other initiatives, not just public art, this group is kind of seeing their role as reaching out to the broader definition of stakeholders in the community. So when, for example, we develop an arts cultural plan for the Rochester area, the AC3 folks are going to be really key in partnering with us in outreach and engaging artists and the community in general around this. So they're going to be really helpful with that. But we know that there's a lot of other folks that are going to play a key role in that when we get to that stage.
Thanks, Kevin. And the AC3 folks also helped us get the word out about these RFPs and are continue to help us get the word out about the RFPs as well. Can the consulting org select artists from within the org? So to clarify, the consulting org will be administering the program, but we intend that in the selection of the artists will be through another request for proposals to enable any artist to submit proposals, and another review panel that will consist of ideally 4 city staffers and 3 stakeholders to review the art proposals, score them based on pre-decided criteria, and select the awardees based on that. Johanna, Kevin, do you have any other?
Well, I think just hypothetically, the root of that question, if someone within that organization that is successful in getting this award up front, someone within that organization happens to be an artist and then responds later to the call for arts, I don't see an issue with that per se.
Right. Okay. Okay, here's another question. Can we submit a proposal for the initial funding, then enhance that with an ongoing plan for outside private funding to build on the city property with additional theme-related art objects? So this is from Bill. So I think what you're asking is, hi Bill, what you're asking is if this could be part of a larger arts program that you're also using private funding, say a grant from somewhere else to build on, right?
Yeah, which would, if you just in terms of time frame, if this is a 1-year program beginning in 23, if there were a concept to go beyond 24, 25, 26 with private funding in that same city location, you're okay with that, right?
Well, I think that would be okay if that additional funding that came later would go towards future installations, but it would not be okay if you're relying on that future funding to go towards what we want to install next year. So the successful organization would have to install this next year, and wouldn't, if they were relying on future funding, then that wouldn't work out for this particular program.
Yeah, the future funding would just be concept around how to make that city property even better.
Sure, as long as there's something that gets installed with this pot of $100,000 this upcoming year, then if the proposal wanted to include that sort of broader vision, like, and we intend to do this, then that would be welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question is there a restriction on orgs hiring artists that are part of their group? For example, could a nonprofit accept proposals from their staff or artist residents? And I think, Amanda, we answered that question, right? You feel like we answered that question with the last similar question?
That would be okay.
Amanda, this question's from Amanda, so I just want to check with Amanda that she feels like that question was answered with the similar question we answered a moment ago.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find I'm on my phone and I couldn't find the unmute button. Yes, that does answer my question. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Okay, and then Blue asked, what is the liability insurance number? So this is a great question. So we determined that liability insurance will be able to be paid through the artist's fee / project cost. And so we're not expecting, that's why there's not a lot about insurance in this RFP for your response. We don't expect that you're going to project the liability insurance cost, but it is something that's maybe helpful for you to keep in mind if you're thinking about a specific project concept or program concept. Just keep in mind that the insurance cost is going to be a factor in how many projects can get funded. And of course, as you know, some project types have a higher liability insurance cost, right? So if you're talking about, for example, a mural that's going to go on the side of a 50-foot building and cover the whole building, that's going to have a much higher liability cost, insurance cost, than a mural going on an interior wall that's 8 feet tall. So it's just a helpful thing for you to keep in mind if you choose to, instead of having an open-ended approach, have a kind of a concept approach. Does that answer your question, Blue?
Well, kind of. I guess what I'm wondering is the city's, does the city have a mandate of a certain amount of coverage, whether or not that organization already has it, or they will buy that coverage with their 20%?
Blue, it's going to really depend on the project. As Heather said, if it's a 50-foot side of a building where scaffolding is going to be erected, that's one issue. If it's smaller murals, and then with the other contract, sculptures that don't have high risk of injury or damage, then the insurance amounts that we would require might be smaller. So we're going to have to do a little bit of a wait and see on that.
So yours is
depending what's being proposed.
You're sort of assuming there'll just be a back and forth after an organization, a winning consultant is selected. You're assuming there'll be some kind of back and forth, like, okay, we see you want to use a crane. We need to make sure that you're going to have this much coverage.
Yeah, basically.
Or nothing. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we don't want to say, hey, you've got to have $500,000 insurance no matter what your project is. That's why we didn't put it in there. So,
well, some municipalities, I think, would require an out of the gate coverage, like some kind of named as, or some certain level of liability, just to be in the conversation, I think.
Well, because we don't know what the projects are going to be. I mean, we obviously do that with most of our city contracts. We do have that requirement, but we don't know what these are going to be. So that's why we didn't want to scare people off, basically, with some amount that is enough to cover the 50-foot wall when that is not necessarily what we're going to get.
No, it's a good detail. I appreciate that. It didn't come up in any previous AC3s that I was involved with, but it's good you're thinking of that, because there could be a small project that would have very little liability need, and an organization shouldn't be
Yeah, we don't-
burdened with a heavy
Yeah,
liability
we,
insurance.
we
coverage.
want the money to go to the art, not to insurance companies
Yeah.
whenever possible. Yeah.
Yeah, no
Okay.
doubt. Thank you.
And we definitely, Blue, spent a lot of time internally getting to that point, figuring that out. It took a lot because it's, yeah. Okay, so Kelly's question, will the RDDC be able to apply for these funds or the Rochester Downtown Partnership? I think based on our answer to earlier questions, the answer is yes, right? Because there's nothing that disqualifies a group from applying, responding to these RFPs.
Except for in the case of folks that recuse themselves from participation because the organization that they represent intended to apply. Folks that I'm sorry, folks that are part of the AC3 that recuse
Right.
those. Those would be
that
the
did
only
not-
organizations that would not be able to apply.
That did not recuse themselves.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Messed up my negatives there. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then question, when you refer to underrepresented artists, do you include deaf and disabled artists in this? And if yes, please consider accommodations. Yes, we absolutely do. And thank you for that reminder. We apologize for not having translation available for this meeting. We normally default to having translation. That was an oversight on our part. And we will definitely work with folks on any accommodations that folks need moving forward. Okay, there's the link. Can an organization submit a proposal for the administration portion, and can they also be the artist to create the art?
I think technically yes, but we would be looking for organizations to show that respond to this stage of the RP to demonstrate a proposal for how they're going to engage multiple artists in a call for art, and definitely hoping to get to underrepresented folks in that process. But if the result of that happens to include someone from that organization who is an artist, then technically that's not necessarily an issue. But we definitely are looking for an organization to sort of cast a bit of a wider net, if possible.
But I do think that this question is maybe getting even more specific, and maybe we can say, because if there's one person who's the point person in an organization on administering the programs, then maybe it's an issue if that person would want to also apply to be an artist, right? An artist can be part of the organization, but maybe it makes sense because the person who's the lead from the organization, who's actually, their part of their job is to facilitate the review of the art proposals. And in that case, that person cannot facilitate the art proposal review if they're an artist. Does that make sense that applied?
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. That's a more specific scenario. Yeah, that in that case, that would be an issue.
Okay. And can the money from these be used to fund already established proposed projects, or does it have to be new art? And I'm going to take the first stab at this. I believe it's fine for it to fund an already established proposed project. It has to meet the criteria, right? It has to be on city-owned property, and on all the other criteria. But this kind of gets to the question too, Kevin, about what you were saying with, we need to make sure that there's something that is an artwork that's created with this program.
Right.
Amanda, do you want to get more specific? Can you get more specific about what you're maybe thinking?
Sure. So the thing that comes to mind immediately is like Rock the Riverway, where they already have an established plan and budget and what they intend to do with all of that space. Could Rock the Riverway apply for this fund and use this money towards that plan that's already been established, for example?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Amanda. So yeah, Rock the Riverway is a city-led initiative of various revitalization projects along the river in Rochester, if you're not familiar with it. So the city, in that scenario, I think you're describing, the city would actually apply for these funds, and that would not be the case. So we would not be looking to, through the Rock the Riverway initiative, apply for funds. However, if an organization wanted to propose that some of the locations along the river that are sort of part of the Rock the Riverway initiative would be good locations for public art. And that organization would then do a call for artists, and something might get located in one of those parks or on one of those bridges. That certainly would be eligible, but the Rock the Riverway initiative in and of itself, which is the city, would not be applying for these funds.
Does that answer the question, Amanda, do you think? Okay, yeah, thank you for the clarity. Okay, we are through all the questions in the chat, and it's kind of perfect timing. It's 2:54. Thank you all for your attendance. We're excited to see your proposals. Please keep in mind the deadline for questions is August 24th, so you have ample time to ask further questions, and we will be sharing the responses to all questions asked with everyone by August 26th. So you all have access to the same information to inform your proposals.
And if I could just add one last thought, you know, obviously we're talking about this current RFP, but that will be followed by a call for artists. We would welcome any of you to help us when we get to that stage, whether you respond to this RFP or not, whether you're successful or not. We would welcome any and all of you to help us get the word out when the time comes for the call for art, because it's not just going to be on that particular organization or the city, but all of us can come together as lovers of art and believers in the value of this in our community to help spread the word to artists throughout the community, and not just the folks that are, you know, sort of well-known artists, but people that you know that might be an emerging artist that might think, I've never done this before, I've never created a mural before, I've never created a sculpture before, but so they might feel intimidated by this. We want to bring those folks in. We want this process not to just result in great public art, but also to be a process that helps nurture artists in our community that are just kind of on that edge, like, oh, I might dip my toe into this, but I'm not sure. So we would welcome all of you to help us with that. Find folks, get the word out, that sort of thing. That's really our part of our vision for this program. So we appreciate any help that you can offer. So if you don't respond, but still want to participate somehow, feel free to reach out to us. And you've got Heather's email on that website, and say, hey, I'd love to help spread the word when the time comes. I've got this great idea for an artist, you know, feel free to submit that down the road. We're welcoming that.
Blue, did you
Blue,
have
you had one more
question?
Yeah, just a quickie. I think it's a great presentation. Thanks, y'all. Really, really well done. And in my mind, like, you know, I'm on a lot of these calls with other, you know, sometimes with like New York State or NIFA or sometimes some private philanthropies. And I think that, you know, this kind of Zoom framework to walk people through the process, have a question period, and then close that question period. Thumbs up on that. That's really a accepted best practice that I noticed among, you know, really well-regarded art funders out there. I would definitely suggest in the transparency piece, the you know, the winning consultant here is probably going to be explaining to the public when they put out their RFP, who's going to be reviewing those submissions. So it does seem only appropriate, and NIFA, other, you know, foundations, NISCA, others also put forth who would be reviewing who would be the grant panel reviewing submissions. So I would advocate that you all add those 7 names to the, you know, to the main city page for this process. It would, you know, build that level of transparency and trust in this process.
Thank you, Blue.
Yeah.
We will do
Thanks.
that.
Will you all do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
We will do that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Johanna, did you have any last words? Uh-oh, you're muted.
Sorry. No, I'm good. I'm fine. Sorry about that. I'm a little discombobulated here.
Okay, great.
Does anybody ever have trouble finding their mute button? Please, really.
Relatable, totally relatable. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much. Have a great day.
Have a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye.